Okay, maklik.
We're going to kind of conclude the aspect of Bereshit, Genesis, that we didn't complete because I guess we spent about close to 3 hours the last time. I thought it was time to quit, right? The most important aspect that we only touched upon, but that we did not really delve into, which coincidentally has to do with this week's portion, which is Parshat Vayera. Parshat Vayera. And as in all classes, we want to immediately press the right keyboards and open up the mental computer so that we can grasp not only the 5% understanding, but to permit that vast mental computer of grasping many levels of the same thing. So even though after leaving the class we think we have one state of understanding, but little by little we begin to review what we've studied, and suddenly we see many other facets. So we begin by reading in Parshat Vayera, Rabchia Patach. And for those of you who do not understand the importance of reading the Hebrew, when the book comes out, you'll understand it more fully. But nevertheless, the power of the alphabet is that power that was once lost and is now, hopefully in the age of Aquarius, going again to be restored. Power of the alphabet. Therefore, we are reading in Hebrew, and I wish to repeat for those of you who have no knowledge of Hebrew, can't read Hebrew, never read Hebrew, don't even know the alphabet. You know the aspect of scanning. If you ever walked into a supermarket, in the most modern supermarkets, you can see the way that register can pick up your goods just by that little box going across a scanner, and everything is registered instantaneously. So that's the same way we deal with the reading, even though if you don't understand it, but read it. Is Rabchia Patach Hanisnim Nira Ba'aretz Eit Hazamir Higia V'Kol Hator Nishma B'Artzeno. This is a verse in Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim, which says that suddenly the crops appeared, and it was the time for singing, and the Kol HaTorah, Tor, suddenly was heard in the land. This is referring to, according to the Zohar, to Genesis 2. You know, we discussed Genesis 1, and Genesis 2 is where we deal with the actual physical, corporeal manifestation of Genesis. Genesis 1 dealt with thought, energy, intelligence, nothing more. It dealt with the reality. It dealt with the 99% of everything. It dealt with the 99% of a table, which is obviously not the physical wood, but it is that thought intelligence consisting of atoms, which again is only 1/10 of 1% of reality. It's the 99% that we're talking about. That's what we want to connect to, because reality is where everything exists, all information exists, and where the cosmos actually exists. Kadbara kudsha berichu alma. When the Lord created the world, Yahiv ba'ara kol chela ditchazer la. He infused and inserted all of the energy that Earth would ever need. However, the kula hava ba'ara, and it was all there. But velo afikat even be'alma, but it did not produce any fruit whatsoever. The earth was there, the trees were there, everything was there. But everything remained in a state of animated suspension. In other words, it was what we can picture to some extent like the seed, potential. We don't even know what potential means. We only know in the frame of reference relative to actual. Actual. When things become manifest, when things are in movement, they are actual. Before that, it is thought. Thought is not actual, so thought is potential. When I think of doing something, we call that potential because it's only in thought. It has not become manifest, so we call that potential. At the time of creation, everything was in animated suspension, was in a state of potentiality. That means the sun that shines in Genesis 1 was a sun that did not shine, but had the potential to shine, but it did not shine. It did not shine. Ad de'itvare Adam, until Adam was created. Keven de'itvare Adam, kula itchaze ba'alma va'ara gliat eba v'chela de'itpagdu ba. A revelation by the Zohar. When in Genesis 2, Adam was actually created, when he was drawn forth from the earth, Adam, from the Adamah, at that point that Adam became a living, physical human being, suddenly everything began to sprout. Everything began to appear in movement. Everything began to become revealed as we know it today. Kigavna dashamayim, the heavens, all of the heavens, lo yavu chelin lara ad ata adam, the heavens, which produces rain, clouds, everything that pertains to the heavens, all of the planets that orbit, did not make any movement until Adam was created. Adiktiv v'chol siach hasadeh terem yeh ba'aretz v'chol esef hasadeh terem yismach ki lo imtir Hashem Elokim al haaretz v'adam ayin lavodet ha'adama. The reason, states the Zohar, the reason why there was no movement, the reason that the heavens could not act in furnishing rain and other aspects that come from the heavens were not revealed. They were not revealed because Adam Ayin, because Adam was not there. V'lo yitzvara. V'kula itakeh beginei. And all remained withheld in this potential state. And the moment that Adam came to the scene, everything became revealed and everything became manifest. So the first lesson we learned from this Zohar was that in Genesis 2, in Bereshit Bet, because Adam appeared, Adam and only Adam created the condition that everything would then become manifest. And therefore, continues and concludes the Zohar, that man controls the cosmos, man controls every animated and inanimated object in this universe. That means we should be able to bend spoons. We should be able to stop the sun, although we have read in Joshua, he stopped the moon, he stopped the sun, stopped the movement of the moon. Things like that has happened. Moses stopped the river, the Red Sea, from flowing. You can say it was fable, it was myth, or you can say that man has that capacity, according to the Zohar, That means not only Joshua, but every person has that potential to create an action. But the first thing we're all going to raise, but I try to do things with my mind, and somehow it doesn't work out. Even if I'm in business, I can really thoroughly plan out a business, and even then it can fail. And that's all on a physical level. And now the Zohar is trying to convince us that those aspects, those objects that I don't even really have the kind of capsules that can bring me to the sun, to control the sun, come in contact with the sun. Goods in a factory, at least I can feel and I can touch it. So to some extent I can control it. But now you're telling me Adam control the universe, and we all come from Adam, and therefore the Zohar says, everyone, because we're all Adam, everyone has that same power to control. But why don't we see it today? Does it really exist? If you remember, we have repeated time and time again that the physicist today has come to the final conclusion that if I'm in New York and I'm thinking of flying to California next week, but because right now I'm thinking of going to California, in fact, in that trip to California, I'm going to take off a couple of hours and walk along the beach on the Pacific Ocean. And while I'm on that sandy beach, I'm going to create footprints. Those footprints already appear before I land in California and before I start walking on that beach. This is the conclusion, and I'm not a physicist, and of course they admit they do not understand how could something occur when on a physical level the individual hasn't even come there. How could that footprint appear? But this is a firm conclusion that because of quantum, which for the Kabbalists was a simple explanation, space and time not being in two places at the same time is an illusion. An illusion? I'd like to be in California, or maybe I'd like to be down in Florida. I'd like to be in a warm spot right now. Can I be there? If you've ever been to Acapulco, close your eyes for a minute. Could you be there? Mm-hmm. Could you enjoy it? Mm-hmm. In that thought? Absolutely. Can you feel warm? Absolutely. That's what the fellow in a mental institution does all day. He's enjoying life 24 hours a day. And the reason he's still there is the doctors have got to do something about that. How can they take him out of this happy position? Right? I mean, how dare he be happy all day? You know, for those of you who never heard the story that will appear soon in another book, you know, about the doctor telling his patient who's in a mental institution, I'm going down to Acapulco. He says, I'll see you down there. Well, of course, it's obvious that the man is deranged and they're not going to let him out of here. And the doctor, you know, prepares for this well-earned vacation with his wife, comes to the airport, snowstorm, 7 hours in the plane on the ground until they get clearance. And then he's got a suite facing the ocean, gets there. And, you know, he's been told that they were overbooked, right? We have to repeat that story because we really don't want to believe it. And the only available room is the one down in the cellar. What's he going to do now? He's got there. And he has to go through these 3 weeks of misery and comes back the same situation. They're snowed in, and so he's flying all around. And when he gets down there, I mean, he can't even get his car to take him home. I mean, it's a real disaster. He gets finally back to the hospital, and Patient says, how'd you enjoy yourself? He says, worst time I ever had. Terrible. I should never have done it in the first place. He says, why? I was down there with you. What a wonderful time I had. I rolled out my jet, got to Acapulco. I reserved in advance the suite, and there it was ready. In fact, I didn't even feel like eating in the dining room. I was served in the room all the time. The chauffeur picked me up each day to travel out on the sandy beach, and what a great vacation. Now, of course, the doctor hears this. He summons all the other doctors. This man is really getting worse. You understand? He's getting worse. I mean, he's great. This doctor is great with all his vacation, but he's getting worse because he's enjoying himself. So what's reality? We've been so conditioned to what reality is that we're forgetting what really reality is all about. Reality tells us the physicists today is not what the five senses can observe. They're crazy, maybe, right? They may be crazy. You know, the old saying, what I can feel, touch, that's reality. They tell you, no, that's no longer reality. That's an illusion. You ever heard of an uncertainty principle? Illusion. It's an illusion. Don't believe it, they're telling us today. Just the opposite of the way they used to convince us about don't believe anything you don't see, feel, touch, smell. Today's the other way around. The five senses is a total illusion. Therefore, we begin with the premise that what we imagine and what we think is reality. But then you'll say, well, I want $1 million to come right down. If thought can produce $1 million, I want $1 million to appear on the table. Well, I'm the mental patient now, and I say I see it. But you all say, but I don't see it. But the physicist told us what you don't see is not reality. It's really there. And I enjoy it because I see it on the table. Who's going to tell me that? Am I insane? The physicist says that 5% is not reality. 95%, that potential that we're told we should achieve, is reality. So the answer is, according to the Zohar, that man was created with the total control of every situation in his life. But there could be two problems. First of all, I have to believe that it could be so, right? And if the doctors tell you, like we discussed in the morning, the only thing I can promise you is temporary relief, that means I have to exclude that there can ever be relief. Because he's already said temporary relief. So there can't be relief. In your mind, you've established temporary relief. That's all you're ever going to get. This is what the Zohar is trying to tell us. That we are in control, and when you seek totality, that's what you get. But unfortunately, we are so consumed in the aspect of 5% of the illusion. Therefore, we never achieve that which we believe we want to achieve. But that we have this potential, and that in Genesis 2, in Bereshit, this condition was created, the answer is absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. Nothing moves in this universe. Nothing moves in this universe without man or mankind's activity. Nothing. Nothing. But you say nothing seems to change. If I can change the sun, doesn't it appear as if it moves and I have no control? And I have no control. The answer is, when I see that the sun is moving, it might very well be an illusion. It might be an illusion. According to the physicists, it is an illusion. Now, what does it mean if I stop the sun or I don't stop the sun? In the area of 95%, if I say I want to stop the sun, assuming there are other conditions, obviously, that would require something from me before I can do whatever I want to do. But the fact that I do not observe the sun, not stopping, not stopping, does not necessarily mean that the sun hasn't stopped. This already is established within quantum physics. It's already been established. I don't have to prove that point any longer. If I am an individual that can connect with the sun, I can stop the sun. Now, why did Joshua want to stop the sun? Couldn't he have defeated the enemy without the sun? I mean, what would happen if it became nightfall? What would have happened if it became nightfall? I mean, the man can create such a miracle and stop the sun, but you understand he couldn't defeat the enemy. I mean, is this logical? Does it sound logical? Would you say that's logical? That he needed the daytime because then he can see how they can shoot. Because if it was nighttime, how could he get the enemy, right? But he can stop the sun. And we're told to believe this is what happened. It's totally illogical. So if we want to merely read the Torah, as the Zohar says, on that superficial level, you've got nowhere. Therefore, we must interpret what happened with Joshua in another area, in another frame of reference. What did Joshua want? Joshua was tapping the energy of the sun. Joshua was tapping the energy of the sun. Why did he need the sun to be shining? Not that he could see the enemy. The enemy was a problem, that's true. But whether it became nightfall or whether it was daytime was not his problem on that physical level. Because we know that the sun represents not something that shines, but a thought, energy, intelligence. It's a power. We tap the energy of the sun. Nightfall, you would say, at night it became dark. The sun stopped shining. Is that true? Of course not. The sun is not shining right now in Hong Kong. The sun is not shining now, not California, but certainly in the Philippines. What does it mean? That he needed, or he didn't want the sun, because the sun follows the commands, not the physical sun. The Torah was never discussing that physical illusionary realm called the sun. The sun has a thought, energy, intelligence. Because you have to ask yourself the question, why does everything rotate around the sun? No astronomer ever dreamt of asking the question, let alone receiving an answer. Why does everything revolve around the sun? Along came Shabtai Ganolo, that famous physicist, that famous physician, and above all, that famous astrologer and astronomer, who obviously took this space capsule to the sun, investigated and explored the sun, and found out that the sun has a balanced state of all energies that exist in this universe. It's balanced. And the reason why everything swirls around is like the electron. Don't ever ask the physicist why the electron circles around the nucleus. That's not a question. Everyone knows that is. He has a problem today because he says you can't very well see everything. But let's just say he knows. We all believe it's there. But why does it circle around? Why? How does the Zohar answer that? Because the electron has a thought, energy, intelligence called the desire to receive, ratzon lekaber, and it's always hungry. And it needs the nucleus to keep tapping. That's why it keeps circling it around. It tries to get close. The minute it gets close, we know the aspect of restriction. Is that right? Everyone wants to get close to the sun. Why? Because the sun has this source of energy, that everyone and everything wants to tap. Can we exist without the sun? No. What Joshua and what the Navi was talking about was not the physical sun. He didn't need the assistance of daylight to control the enemy. But Joshua knew how to tap that power of the sun. And what Joshua knew was that everything in this universe is governed by laws and principles. That means when in this area at 8:30 New York time, that sun which is still shining, for this area, the aspect of negativity, the aspect called night. In other words, what brought night? The sun set. That's a fool. It's like, why is Jerusalem or Israel the holy city or the holy land? Because the temple was there. But the Kabbalist asks, why was the temple there in the first place? To make that place holy. Because nothing on a physical level can ever explain away why things are the way they are. The leaf, the branch, observing it and exploring a branch doesn't tell me what that seed contained. Nothing that follows can ever explain the thing it came from, unless I have that seed in front of me. So why does the sun set? And what did Joshua mean when he said, I was stopping the movement of the sun? He was stopping not the physical sun. That could have gone on. That wasn't important for him. What he stopped was nightfall, which represents another energy intelligence called night. Darkness. What is darkness? Not the desire to share, not balancing. It's like the electron. Continually, in fact, we even know some people who run around in circles all day and they're throughout their entire life. Do we know people like that? It's the same thing. Why are they running around in circles? Because they haven't achieved. They're looking for something that they can't seem to get a handle on. Why are they running around? Why don't they just sit quiet and relax? Take it all in, enjoy themselves. They're on the go all the time. Why? Like the electron. Like all those planets. See, the cosmos is one. Quanta says everything is one. Everything behaves the same way. Because there's only three kinds of energy intelligences. There's the thought of sharing, which is the sun, that sharing concept, that balanced concept. And so when we give tzedakah, we're not giving tzedakah to be good people. It was never the intent. It is to activate, to press that key on a computer board, to set up your hard disk so you can program into what? The information. What's information? Energies. To tap into that sun that is balanced energy so I can take that energy and defeat the enemy. Whether the sun kept moving or not was unimportant, but he knew the laws and principles of the universe, that if darkness set in, it was only an indication that the sun in this frame of reference could not operate. Ran back into its animated suspension frame of reference. It was not supposed to function. Now the sun does not function. The sun is here. But its energy is not felt, and because its energy is not felt, darkness can come in. But that doesn't mean the sun, the physical sun, is here or it's not here. Therefore, what Joshua was trying to attempt was through, and he knew the Kabbalah obviously, Moses knew it as well, he revealed it in Parshot Bereshit, the 72 names, and that he passed on to Joshua. So Joshua knew how to tune in and control, not control that the sun didn't move, but that the sun did not cease to function as an energy power like it functions during the day. We all feel its warmth. Trees can't grow. Nothing can move without the sun. So what Joshua accomplished, because man has dominion, says the Zohar, in Genesis 2, over everything that exists in the cosmos. So Joshua took control of the sun. What sun? The physical sun? The 5%? The illusion? That's not where he's at. He wants to get into reality. He wants to get into the real stuff. And so he prevented that energy, the internal energy of the sun, from ceasing to manifest itself, even though it was nightfall. Even though you couldn't see the sun, but the force of the sun remained still. What does it mean it remains still? It functioned like it would during the day. And so the moon stood still. What do you mean the moon stood still? That's another question by and within itself. The moon stood still. I mean, the moon could be during the day. Have you ever seen the moon during the day? So why does the verse have to go into explaining that he put a stop to the sun, he put a stop to the moon? Tails? What we're talking about is a cosmic code, as the Zohar says. There is nothing more in that Torah. Nothing that could be translated, could be interpreted on a physical level. Nothing. It is only to provide us how we can take control, not only of the cosmos, but at its very least, at least take control of our own lives. And that's where really we don't want to bend spoons, because that isn't going to help much. That isn't going to prevent someone driving on a highway and some drunk coming in at that moment at the wrong time and hitting somebody. What is bending the spoon? If you don't even know, you're not aware of what's happening. Can we control these things? That's what the Torah provides us with. That information for only one reason, that we can again relive that moment of Adam Rishon before the sin, when he is in total control of everything and total control at least of his own life. Therefore, when we ask the question, the moon stops, the moon doesn't stop, I want the money to be on the table. If I am in the state of consciousness like Adam Rishon or Joshua, and I have learned the rules, the channels on how to make connection, because if Joshua couldn't make connection, it's like my face is that way, and Dov is facing the other way, and we're not talking to each other. If there's no communication, then you don't know what I want to say, and I don't know what you want to say. There's got to be this aspect always referred to in the Kabbalah as face-to-face. What do you mean face-to-face? Making connections. So, we know that in the Ana B'Koach, that prayer of Ana B'Koach, that we recite in the morning, we recite in the afternoon, we recite with kavanot. Kavanot. Meditation. Particular letters. What is the purpose of that? Why did the Sefer Yetzirah bring that to our attention? Why did the Zohar bring it to our attention? Why did Rabbi Isaac Luria bring it to our attention? Why did all the Kabbalists bring it to our attention? Because, as Rabbi Shimon said, in the age of Aquarius, the Zman HaMashiach, all this information will again be restored. It's here now. It's all printed. Nobody can tell anybody to study or not to study. It's all there. You just have to walk into a bookstore and you can buy it. So it's not a question any longer regarding the availability of this information. It's all there. So some understand it a little deeper, some understand it a little less. But it's all there already. And therefore we have kavanot, therefore we have prayer. For what reason do we pray? For what reason? Because prayer is that form of system connection, the channels by which we can actually control and dominate everything around us. And despite the fact that maybe I don't see it, I think we wash that out. Who wants to operate on the 5% level of the five senses? 5 senses, 5% is crazy. I guess the psychiatrist devotes 1% to each of the 5 senses. Why does he choose 5% and why are there 5 senses? I guess they finally came down to the last 5. But they recognize that the 95% is your potential. Bring it out. How? What school can you attend? Harvard doesn't give a course on revealing the 95%. So where do you go? Where do you go? Who can teach it to you? The Kabbalah makes at least an attempt to bring out that potential of the individual. How can you bring out that potential? By making yourself connected with things that are reality. We're past, present, and future. Because if I wanted that money on the table, and we're talking about a Kabbalist who could do that, but why did he want the money on the table? Can you imagine if you put $1 million on the table, close the room, and walk back 50 years later? What do you find? Nothing more than the $1 million served no purpose. So you could have possession of something. It does not necessarily mean that you control it. So when the Kabbalist said, and he made that connection, he could connect to what? Not that physical. He didn't need the manifestation of the physical being to be able to make use. He made use of energies which are far more superior than to the physical connections. Therefore, getting back to the original point of the Zohar, whatever we want, whatever we desire, that is what we get, as we've learned in the Talmud Sefirot. There's no question about it. All of us can close our eyes for a minute. All of us. And we can be wherever we want. And if you think you wanted to have that $1 million, what could $1 million buy you? Could it buy you a castle of 285 rooms? No. Why settle for $1 million? Settle for the castle if that's what you really want. You can have it in a minute. There's only one problem. How do I maintain it? You see, how long can I dream? In fact, if I could keep dreaming, it would be great. But you see, there are other things that happen along the way. In meditation, you could begin meditating about one thing, and it doesn't take maybe 5 seconds, 20 seconds, or a minute, you're off to something else. You no longer enjoy that which you began to dream. Think about that for a minute. You lost it. You lost it. You're out to something else. Now you're out to some argument you had last week with some fellow, which is so upsetting. And that's taking up now 20 minutes of your thought. Is that right? You've lost your 250-room house with the 87 Mercedes, right? With your jumbo jet, which has your own bed and everything else of all the amenities. And they don't let you. You got to think about something else. Think about it. They don't let you. See, the capitalist could stay right on. He could stay right on. He knows how to maintain it. In Talmud Spirot, what we learn in the morning is the method by which we want to capture, but maintain it. Because there's too much going on that doesn't permit it. It doesn't permit us to retain it. That's where you separate the men from the boys, you see. The boys can think he wants everything and he gets it for a minute. This is something that is going to need a lot of re-education to come to the conclusion that whatever we want, we achieve instantly because Adam Arishon and every humankind following Adam Arishon by being there. Because Adam Ayin Lavod, he wasn't there, nothing existed. Adam Arishon was there, everything came out into reality, into the real reality. That is true for us today. But we have a problem. How do you maintain that? How do you stay away from illusion? Okay, we'll have a 5-minute break.
Right. Okay, we'll now touch a little upon Noach, the deluge, the flood. Again, which child, whether he attended any form of religious school, even if he just went to ordinary secular school, he probably heard about Noah and the ark, and if you went to Broadway, you would see, who was that fellow, Danny Kaye, right? I mean, so it's really popular. It's really popular. So we have the story in Parshat Noach, and we'll begin again to understand what this was all about. Was it a story? Was Danny Kaye really right, and that's all there is to it? Or there is a kind of a cosmic message there? Because the old rule, no matter what the rabbi says in the congregation or temple, what does that flood do for me today? Other than telling me be a good boy because it can happen to you. But then again, I know it won't ever happen again because the Bible itself promised Noah that he would never again bring the flood. So what does the flood and the boat, other than being entertaining, and I'm not going to, kind of put down Danny Kaye with his production, but is there maybe something more we can draw out from, Parshot Noach? Little more. So we begin with Rab Chia Patach. Rabbi Chia, one of the students of Rabbi Shimon, and he quotes the verse in Isaiah, "Va'amcha kulam tzadikim le'olam yirshu eretz netzer matai masei yada litpaer." It's a verse that says, I'm not sure if I'm in total agreement, but it looks like maybe all Jews are righteous people. Okay? And they're going to inherit the earth, right? And all good things. And then the Zohar continues in his own style, in elaboration of this particular verse, by saying, "Zakain in liyisrael lemishtadlei ba'oraita v'yadei orchen de'araita de'beginei yiskon le'alma da'ati." Now here we kind of almost touching on a religious scene. You see, if you begin to study the Torah, you will, and you follow the ways of the Torah, then you're pretty sure that you're going to reach the world to come. Well, that's not exactly the way the Zohar thinks. This is what the verse in Isaiah was all about. Tachazi, Kol Yisrael itlon chulkali al madati. All of Israel, before they even begin their approach to the road, they've already inherited the world to come. My time, it began the Natrin bit the Alma it Kayim Ale. Because they fulfill the Brit. Now we can say it means just the aspect of circumcision. Or we can also mean a covenant. Because a covenant is mentioned throughout. And that Noach was called a Tzadik, a righteous person, because he fulfilled the covenant. The first aspect of the Zohar is immediately to tell us this, this concept of Olam Haba, the world to come. We could all immediately question, was I there? I mean, let's assume I don't remember my prior incarnation. I have a problem. So how do I know there's a world to come? Because I'm told. But that's a funny rule because, especially if we're Jewish, you very rarely, believe everything you hear. Right? Rarely. So just because we're told really isn't going to turn all of us on and believe that there's a world to come. But what we have already discussed in Bereshit, that the world to come, in its interpretation by the general theme of the rabbinate, is the world to come, and so you've got to be a good boy. And from the Zohar's point of view, he says, Kol Yisrael itlan hulka lamadati. Everyone has the portion. And wait a second. How do we know? He may become bad. He may sin. How does he immediately have that portion? How is he immediately connected? Haven't we learned that the only one who will inherit that beautiful paradise of the world to come is those righteous people? And not everybody's going to be righteous. And therefore his interpretation is, Alma Da'ati, he's talking about the world of reality. And you know where the world of reality is? Right here. Not talking about after death. The world to come, I don't like the world to come. Olam Haba. Olam Haba. That comes. If it was really the future world, in Hebrew, for those of you familiar with Hebrew, the word should be Alma Datida, future world. There's a word for future. And while most Israelis really don't know the Hebrew language, despite the fact that they talk it, but they really don't know it, because they never question the words that they even use. If we study, and that's what the Zohar is saying, if we study the words, the Hebrew words, those Hebrew words, then we will know that there is a word selah, which means what? Stone. Then we know there's a word called Evan. What does that mean? Stone. We need more than one word? One word sufficient. Why do you need two? But we know the power of the alphabet, and we know the power of words that consist of the alphabet, that they each contain a very definitive and distinct thought, energy, intelligence. It's an energy, to the extent that we have already learned from the Sefer Yetzirah that the world was created, how? Through the alphabet. Can you imagine a letter Aleph, a letter Bet creates? It's inconceivable. I can draw a letter, and I'm not going to create, let's say, Bet. Bet was used to create what? Saturn. Come on now. I mean, let's be realistic. However, the Kabbalist explains away the Bet producing Saturn, because the Bet, in its shape and form, contains that particular motion of energy, a conglomerate of particular forms of energy that can produce a planet called Saturn. The world to come doesn't mean the future world, doesn't mean tomorrow. It is the world that is here, but you never really get to it. You know how many times we plan something in work? You're supposed to do it now. You're supposed to get rid of it, deal with it. And for whatever reason, we push it off. Is it future work? Work of now. Work that has come to me. But what did I do with it? How did I deal with it? I pushed it away, right? I set it aside. But it's not future work. It's work that came to me. And what do I do with it? I put it aside. I don't deal with it. That's the word haba, olam haba. Olam from the word helam. That invisible. That world that exists beyond the five senses, but is really the reality of existence. That we continue to push aside. We don't deal with it. That's olam haba, says the Zohar. Therefore, we all have a portion in that. The fact that we are alive, we are connected. But there is no guarantee that you are connected in a sense that you are conscious of its existence. There's a letter to be opened up. You look at the envelope, you know where it's coming from. You know that it's got a message for you. But you don't want to deal with it now. Are you connected with the letter? Yes and no. Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that I touch it, I feel it. I know where it's coming from. I know where it's coming from. And yet, I don't deal with it. So when the Zohar says, praiseworthy are those who are dealing with the Torah, dealing, doesn't say the word incidentally, study. Even in Hebrew, osek b'Torah, doesn't say he studies Torah. He deals with Torah. He deals with Torah. What a corruption. We all are under the impression we've got to study Torah. You can study Torah like you can do the Amidah day in and day out and never be connected with the physical words that have been expressed. No connection. It's come to you. It's even become part of you. You speak it. But insofar as your consciousness about it is concerned, it's as if it doesn't exist. So you have to deal with it. The word is deal with it. Lasok b'Torah. Why lasok b'Torah? Because that's, in that Torah, is where we're dealing with those things that we are generally not conscious of. And because we are not conscious of, what does the physicist say? See this chair? I mean, he's insane. He belongs really with a guy who we think really belongs on the outside. The physicist says, you see this chair? As long as I don't look at it, and I don't see it, and I don't perceive this chair, it does not exist. I mean, isn't that ridiculous? You're all looking at this chair now, and I'm not. The chair doesn't exist. Now, we're not here to study physics. But what the physicist doesn't even understand when he repeats those kind of insane statements is that when you don't deal with something, like the letter, you don't deal with it, there is no connection. You can touch it, you can know where it came from, but if you didn't open up and make that total connection, it doesn't exist. If you never open up that letter for all intents and purposes, for me, did not exist. For the one who opens it up, it does exist. So it's not so difficult to understand that when you don't deal with things, they really don't exist. So it is the lack within ourselves that we are not dealing with reality. Therefore, when the Zohar says, and in Parshot Noach, we don't even know yet, I mean, like, why is he discussing it, this radical concept here, explaining away all physics in one or two sentences? You imagine? We're covering the area that takes at least 20 years. And then, as I'm writing now, if you have 5 minutes to waste, and I really say 5 minutes to waste, pick up any book on physics. You will always find the same thing. At the end of the chapter, it will say, we believe and we speculate. Always. You will never find a chapter without a conclusion. We believe and we speculate. So I finally come out and declared that those physicists are Orthodox Jews. They believe. They don't know. They believe. Right? It's like the Jews on Mount Sinai, the corruption. Nasa v'nishma, right? Oh, what beautiful Jews, right? You all know that lecture. They were on Mount Sinai, and there was Hashem, and he said, take the Torah. And they didn't even want to hear what it contains, right? They said, of course we accept a corruption of the interpretation. Jews? That's why Hashem had to tell the Jews, look, get into that pit. I just, bent over the mountain. And if you don't accept the Torah, I'm going to cover the mountain over you, and that's where you're going to die. So he forced them into it, and suddenly some rabbis are coming around with a corruption of that verse, Nasa v'nishma. Look how obedient. I haven't even found the Jew yet that is so obedient. But I'm supposed to believe a tale of Nasa v'nishma, meaning obedience. There's no such Jew. And certainly not those Jews.
We were threatened.
What's that?
We were threatened.
Oh yeah. Kafalem ha kigiyit. He bent it over like a a cracker, two sides, right? And all the Jews went in there in that hole. And he said, if you don't take the Torah, bingo, you're all gone.
What about coercion?
What's that?
What about love?
Now we have another problem. There's no coercion in spirituality, right? Beautiful question, which is not what I want to address myself to, because that is discussed. That is discussed in the lectures, in the beginning lectures. Is that right? Right. That's discussed. So the physicist says, "I believe, I accept things that he doesn't even understand." We are not going to accept anything that we do not understand. Therefore, the Zohar says, "V'yadei orchin deoraita." He must have been a radical in his days, because he says you have to know the ways of the Torah. It doesn't say you have to fulfill the ways of the Torah, be obedient. He says you have to know because the beginning is going la'almadati, because it's the only way you're going to make connection. And so, 20 years ago, I wouldn't have dared to tell those people who attend a temple or a synagogue, if you don't know what you're doing, you're wasting your time because you're not connecting. It's a total waste of time because the Zohar says you must know. And of course, for that Orthodox Jew who puts on tefillin, the last verse, V'yadat et Hashem, it says, V'yasakli be'emunah v'yadat et Hashem. You have to know because it's the only way you can make your connection. Therefore, we're all connected, but that doesn't mean we are all conscious of our connection. We could be touching it, we could be feeling it, but it doesn't mean I'm connected with it. I can drive down that road, do 100 miles on a highway, and after an hour and a half, wake up and say, how did I get here? And mind you, I was driving that car maybe 90 miles an hour. And yet I'm in total control and was totally oblivious of what was going on. How is that possible? It is. In other words, when he referred to this introduction to Parshat Noach, the Zohar realized that when he himself is of the opinion that we can't accept Danny Kaye's interpretation of the flood, and therefore we have to delve into the internal inner meaning of what's really going on. He realized that we must have this kind of introduction. And he proceeds on to say that Noah was a Tzadik. What does a Tzadik mean? A righteous person. What is a righteous person? He's right all the time? Is that a righteous person? He's a Tzadik. He never does wrong. That must be a righteous person. But I'm going to throw at you two contradictions. Number one, the Gemara, the Talmud. I'm not even sure it's quoted in the Zohar. But for the Talmudists, it says that Ein Tzadik Ba'aretz Sheyaseh Tov V'lo Yechteh. There is no righteous person in the world that only does good, but that he also should not sin. So what is a righteous person? Why do we refer to him as a righteous person? Furthermore, being right or wrong, the Gemara, and including the Zohar, says that whenever there's a quarrel between two sages, let's say Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. They're both right. They're both right. And the Zohar says, how could they be both right? Isn't there one reality? Either yes or no. But how could it be both yes and no? And the Zohar goes on to reveal what Quanta revealed only the last couple of years, that it depends upon where you're coming from. Imagine 2,000 years ago, the Zohar raised this question about Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel. How could they both be right? One says Asur on a particular question that was raised in Halacha, what the law was, and usually Bet Shammai said Asur. He was the one who was kind of rough on the people. He was hard, always said this is not permitted, that is not permitted. And contrarily, Hillel would yet generally say mutar, permitted, more lenient. And the Talmud, along with the Zohar, says they're both right. How could they both be right? That's the Zohar's question. Although physicists today say, sure, for one, the chair exists. The other one, the chair does not exist. Are they both right? Yes. How do you explain it away? That was the Zohar's question 2,000 years ago. Look at this great revelation. He didn't even get a Nobel Prize for it. Right? And he answers very simply. See, Bet Shammai came from Kaf Small. His internal characteristic, his neshama, his soul, stemmed from a left column, internal, integrated computer. He didn't use the word computer. Left column means what? Negativity. Like the electron. Like the Jew. Always traveling around. You ever see a Jew? You see all the movies about the Jews. They're always going with a package. You ever see a Jew without a package? He's always on the go. Always carrying something. Can't he walk around without carrying something? But he's always ready to go somewhere else. So he needs a package. That might be all he has. He's always moving. That's the problem. He's always moving. Right? That's negativity, like the electron. Never ceases to move. Why? Because it has an internal characteristic known in Kabbalistic terms as Ratzon Lekabel, the desire to receive. Hillel, on the other side, the reason that he was so lenient, because he came from Kav Yamin, the sharing aspect. When do you generally share? When you have something to give away. And by coincidence, Bet Shammai was the wealthy one, and Bet Hillel was the poor fella. Never had what to eat. He's the one you heard about the stories. He didn't have money to pay the tuition, and so he went up on the skylight, and then it started snowing, and all of a sudden, they used to have their light by the skylight, and it suddenly became dark, and they would go upstairs, and there he was, The story. He was a poor man. And what a paradox. The poor man is lenient. He's from Kav Yamin, says the Zohar. He was the sharing. His internal energy, thought, intelligence was constantly of a sharing characteristic, as opposed to Bet Shammai, maybe because he had too much money. Then why did he need so much more? But he was within this frame of reference known as Ratzon Lekabel, desire to receive negativity. They were both tzaddikim, but they both came from another frame of reference. Therefore, declares the Zohar, because each one saw as an observer, through his own, not only eyes, but through his whole mental and internal soul process, everything he observed from within that frame of reference. Left column, desire to receive. Hillel, coming from a right column attitude, characteristic, was more lenient, etc. So in other words, both of them were correct. Why? Because each one established, according to the Zohar, that man establishes that which is. You see the chair exists. You don't see the chair, it doesn't exist. The same principle. You are negative, everything around you is negative, because you establish that magnetic field all around you. And that magnetic field can extend even all the way to Hong Kong. We even have people calling just from Hong Kong in the middle of the learning session, right? Connection, they're hungry. They want to connect. I can't blame them. But, right? Quanta. Everything is connected. When we say everything is connected, it means that I touch everything. Now the question is, do I want temporary relief or do I want the whole relief? All in the mind. Depends where you're coming from. Everything depends on where you're coming from. So Bet Shammai came from Kaf Small. from that left column of negativity. That's the way he judged. That's the way he issued decrees. From his frame of reference, the way his internal soul composite saw things, understood things. So this idea of relativity, everything is relative. It depends on the individual. Therefore it says, Al tadun chavercha ad shetegia limkomo. You can never judge another individual. Why can't you judge him? I know better. I'm the rabbi. I'm the rabbi. But therefore it says, Ein Tzadik ba'aretz. There is no such thing as a righteous person in this physical, corporeal world who does good in a general sense. By and large, the majority of the time he does good, but that he should not sin. Because in that, what is he here for? There must be a purpose. He must come to the test. He must come to the opportunity that he can elevate himself. Without an opportunity of elevating oneself, so he has to have that test. This is what the tzaddik is about. Righteous does not mean he's always right, because you could be wrong. But if you're connected with what? With what? If you're connected with yourself, you know yourself, then you don't judge others. Why? Because I know me. I know why. If I'm an ass sign, I want to run. If you're a shore, he disappeared on me. Where is he? Oh, no, but the other one, they're all around. I just want to be sure I had the support. Right? But I lost one. I lost Chaim. Did I lose Chaim?
Chaim is here.
Chaim is there too. But if you're a Taurus, don't take the ground from under me, right? Or if you're, let's say, other signs, right? Everyone has his particular and peculiar composite of a computer. And everybody works in his frame of mind. So who am I of another frame to tell somebody else what he's doing is right or wrong? Unless I can become that other individual. Unless I can become that other individual. Be that other individual. Feel what that other individual feels. Understand as that other individual understands. Other than that, how can I judge? Bet Shammai did not agree with Bet Hillel because they both came from two different spaces. So how can I judge another person if I'm in one frame of reference and he's in another? That is a tzaddik. So the tzaddik is not always the one who is right, but if he's connected with himself, he understands himself. He's not touching himself. He's not touching the letter. Who's not connected to himself? I mean, it's almost a physical impossibility not to be connected to ourselves. I mean, here I am. I am and I exist. So I'm not connected. You can ride down that road at 90 miles an hour recklessly, and yet you have everything under control and not realize that you travel for an hour. Are we in control? Are we connected to ourselves? There are times, like in the Amidah, that's the perfect place to be disconnected. That's the place, the Shmoneh Esrei, the most important part of the prayer. You could be in 1,000 other places, and you could rattle off all the words, and you're not even there. What a phenomena. That can only happen by man. An animal doesn't go through a trip like that. He has total consciousness. We're not even as good as an animal. That's not true. These other aspects are necessary because Ein Tzadik ba'aretz asher ya'aseh tov v'lo yachteh. If he didn't have these various opportunities, he couldn't grow. He couldn't develop. Problems are not problems. Yes, they could be problems, and they could also be opportunities. Depends how you look at it. Everything everything in this universe could be good for one and bad for another. Depends on how we observe. Depends if we're in touch with things. Depends if we're touching the envelope or we read the envelope. We're connected with the envelope. So we may not be connected with ourselves. When the Torah calls someone like Noach a Tzadik, it was because he was connected with himself. He was connected with himself. By virtue of being connected with himself, that is called a Tzadik. Therefore, you could sin because he couldn't. It was a rough opportunity. He tried to deal with it and he failed. Failing is not a sign of not being righteous. Because righteous is being conscious of everything that's going on. But in this universe, within us, there is another force. The reason we have two hands. Why are two hands, not one? To indicate that there's a right and there's a left to us. Therefore, every part of our body is divided into two. Every part of our body is divided into two parts, right and left. Because it depends on us alone. There is no inbuilt, like in the bulb, inbuilt structure that makes balance between right and left. Man is the only living entity that has right and left, but it's totally left to his discretion in creating balance. He can either create an overcharge or too little. It all depends on himself. If he's connected, he will create the balance. The Tzadik is always conscious. That doesn't mean because he's always conscious that he can't fail. But you say if he was conscious all the time, how did he fail? If he was conscious, how did he fail? The answer is, he's conscious of both the right and he's totally conscious of the left. Now, by circumstances beyond his control, could there be anything beyond his control? There can be. Weather conditions. Comes a season, there's no winter season. How do you control that? For the tzaddik to say, but I've got to have my season. If I don't have a winter season, the goods will get stuck. Right? So let it be cold. But the tzaddik cannot do that because, in essence, he is not connected with himself because himself is part of everything, as Quanta says. And therefore, by asking for it to be cold, at the same time, he is now doing what to others? It's like the judgment of others. He is interfering with someone else's tikkun. Someone else maybe needs, for whatever reason, one other person in the world. And there is, unfortunately, one other person beside me. If there was nobody else but me, there would never be a problem, right? It's only because there is one other person. So the tzaddik recognizes this condition at all times. So it's not a question that the tzaddik is right all the time, and it does not mean that the tzaddik cannot give one form of opinion like Bet Shammai or Beit Hillel, and it means he's wrong. Now why and what does all this have to do with Noah? Now while obviously time will not permit, and how much time do we have left?
8 minutes.
8 minutes.
So
All right. What's that? Yeah, we have so many. I'm gone since 2:30. The relationship between this introduction to Parshat Noach, which, of course, superficially, the connection between the introduction of the Zohar to Parshat Noach is because Noach was called a Tzadik. And therefore, he wants to provide us with a thorough and full explanation of what Noach was about. If that's all that it was about, then who needs the boat? Noach, come on. If he's such a tzaddik, he has total control. Like we asked, Joshua couldn't defeat the enemy if he didn't put a stop to the sun, but therein is going to lie our answer. Noach needed the boat, right? The Zohar asked a question. Imagine the Zohar asked such a question. Why the boat? Now I'm going to disappoint you and tell you there was no boat. There was no boat. But the Torah says boat, right? But you remember we just got through saying, the Zohar says in Parshat Balotcha, if we are going to treat the Torah, as I love those Bible story books of the Reformed Temple and of the Orthodox Temple and of the Conservative Temple, the Bible stories, which fortunately today are totally out of style for most young people today. What's that?
The word ark, not boat.
Teva, right? It should have said, oh, you must know Hebrew, but you didn't pick it up. אתה לא מדבר עברית? איזה מילה בשביל boat? I'm telling you, what's the word for boat? Teva. Teva? ענייה. אין מילה ענייה. In other words, it doesn't mean a boat. It means an ark. What's an ark? What's an ark? Who produced this word? The word is teva. Box. Box. Different sizes in boxes, so the Torah goes on to tell us the size of his box. The size of his box, he was an architect, a good one probably, and he was a good general contractor, right? All of these things fit into the story of Noach, and that's what we're going to learn. What do we learn from that story? You want me to tell you what we learned from that story? Zero. If that's all we're going to talk about, is that he was a great architect, he was a great general contractor. Is that all it's about? The Zohar says if that's the way you treat the Torah, you're a fool. Rabbi Shimon says that. I just couldn't have the guts to say something like that. But that's what he says. And he says Teva means Malchut. It means the thought, energy, intelligence. Wow. What is he talking about? Can you be saved by thought? How does anybody save themselves? They just save themselves, or they figure out how to get out of it? Usually there is some thought. I guess most of us really should always think how we extricate ourselves. How do you extricate yourself from a problem? By extricating yourself, or you think about how you're going to get out? Thought. Everything is thought. The chair. I think chair. Chair is there. Don't think chair, it's not there. So the Zohar says Teva means Malchut. And I'll leave you a little in suspension and tell you that he created the first security shield of thought, energy, intelligence. There was no ark. There was no wood. The dimensions do not mean it's over. The dimensions have nothing to do with the physical ark. The security shield. Have you seen Star Wars? Then you know what I'm talking about. If you don't go see that movie, you don't know what I'm talking about. The security shields, right? Couldn't. What? The force fields? What are you talking about? That's what he was talking about. That's right. He just created. Like we all have a magnetic field around us. Who sees it?
Was there water? Was the flood real water?
Of course not. Of course not. When there is a flood, the water is beautiful, like a big Indian, and it could be a horror. Ever try going to the mikveh in Tel Aviv when they got waves like 30 feet high, but they come in Tel Aviv, they come in 30 feet high right at the shore. It's a dreadful feeling, like you're going to sink, you're going to disappear, right? Water has a power. It's not going to overcome you. But if you know that water is just going to envelop you, it's all in the mind, right? The teva was not a physical teva, says the Zohar. Those dimensions, which time does not permit, dealt with the knowledge that Noah had, and those were the codes. Those are the codes by which you and I today, if you've got somebody you want to be protected from, there is your lesson. Someone coming at you, and I don't mean even someone coming at you with a gun. That's for shalom. Reminds me of the story when my wife, who sometimes travels fast, was going at 110 miles an hour down the Palisades Parkway. All of a sudden, 6 police cars, and they're all going like that. And she pulls over. And they all come over and say, "Did you see anybody pass by here just now?" She says, "Yeah, he's already gone." I mean, they were right in back of us all the time. This is not a miracle. It's happened to all of us. He didn't see. It happens all the time. It happens all the time. Suddenly, for whatever reason, a security shield envelops an individual the same way as a field of magnetics around an individual. Okay.